After I got out of the mental hospital, the CEO regretted it to madness. Before marrying Fu Nanzhou, I knew he was obsessed with doting on his sister. But I never expected that when his sister framed me for torturing and killing a kitten, he would send me to a mental hospital. In the mental hospital, I was tortured in every possible way. Later, I finally gave up on him and only asked for divorce. The usually proud CEO Fu regretted it deeply, stabbing himself with tears in his eyes, just to beg me to love him once more. Nanzhou, I really didn't kill Peace. How could I possibly hurt a kitten? I collapsed pathetically on the ground, desperately clutching Fu Nanzhou's hand. Everyone looked at me with fury, as if they wanted to tear me apart. Fu Ruruo cried uncontrollably, "Sister, why did you hurt my kitten? It only scratched you once by accident." The kitten's skin was forcefully peeled off, its sapphire-like eyes gouged out, lying on the ground covered in blood. I kept shaking my head. It really wasn't me. You psycho, you should be in a mental hospital. Fu Nanzhou looked at me with disappointment, his words cold.
No.
No. I don't want to go to the mental hospital. No. I cried out, suddenly opening my eyes. It was just a dream. I looked at the small dog cage confining me. How could I forget? A year ago Fu Nanzhou had already sent me to the mental hospital. Click, click, click. High heels struck the floor, making crisp sounds that seemed especially clear in this sunless mental hospital. I started trembling uncontrollably, biting my lip hard until it bled. It was Fu Ruruo. She had come to torment me again. Get out. Several men opened the dog cage, forcefully dragging me out. My hair was forcefully grabbed by Fu Ruruo, the pain forcing me to look up. After several heavy slaps across my face, my cheeks were burning with pain. Without looking, I knew they were swollen. You cheap woman. What tricks did you use? Why is my brother still thinking about you? Fu Ruruo angrily gripped my neck, while cursing nonstop. Cheap woman. Cheap woman. You whore. The intense feeling of suffocation made my eyes roll back. At the last second, she finally released her grip. Asterisk cough, cough, I coughed violently. Without even catching my breath, I immediately knelt down and kowtowed while apologizing. I'm sorry, it's all this worthless dog's fault. I'm kowtowing to admit my mistakes. After I kowtowed until I was dizzy, Fu Ruruo finally showed mercy and said, Fine, Shinjiayue, remember to behave yourself when you get out, understand? I kept my head down, unable to hide the joy in my eyes. Go out? I can go out now? I could hardly believe my ears. Brother said your birthday is coming up, so he's taking you home for a break. You know what you should and shouldn't say, right? Fu Ruru's high heels pressed on my head, the sharp heel causing pain. This dog knows. Knows. As long as I can get out, at least I'll have enough food and warm clothes, and no one will beat me. When I saw Fu Nanzhou again, my heart still trembled uncontrollably. After a year apart, he was still as spirited and dazzling as ever. So slow. Fu Nanzhou said coldly, sharp-tongued as always. Fu Ruruo ignored his cold face and tugged at his sleeve coquettishly. My dear brother, it's just that your sister needed time to put on makeup. Don't be angry, my dearest brother. Fu Nanzhou smiled indulgently and gently tapped her nose. All right. Whatever my little sister says is right. Let's go home. I obediently followed behind, without the slightest discontent. Fu Nanzhou abruptly stopped walking, causing me to bump straight into his back. Startled, I instinctively stepped backward and looked fearfully toward Fu Ruruo. Fu Nanzhou frowned slightly and opened the car door. Shinjiayue, you take the front passenger seat. As soon as he said this, Fu Ruruo glared at me several times in secret anger. I shook my head repeatedly. No, I'm fine sitting in the back. The air seemed to freeze. Fu Ruruo acted coquettishly, wanting to sit in the front passenger seat, but this time Fu Nanzhou insisted unusually that I sit in front. In the end, I gave in. I had loved him for 10 years, and compromising for him had become a habit. Your birthday party has already started, don't embarrass me. Fu Nanzhou glanced at me indifferently. You look nice. I clenched my fists and nodded slightly. At this moment, I was wearing a white long-sleeve dress that perfectly concealed those unsightly wounds, and I also wore lace gloves on my hands. I turned my head away, not daring to meet Fu Nanzhou's eyes. I was afraid of him. My gaze unconsciously fell on the car window, where a bright yellow ornament looked particularly out of place in the gloomy car. It was the sunflower decoration I had stubbornly insisted on putting there in the past. It was still nodding its head tirelessly, just like how I used to love Fu Nanzhou without ever getting tired. Perhaps it was because besides him, no one had ever been kind to me. When I was 15, both my parents passed away. My relatives were all busy fighting over the inheritance and couldn't wait to get rid of me. Then, a divorced man 20 years older than me stroked my face and said I would be his child bride from now on. Fu Nanzhou, who was 17, came to my house for business and witnessed this farce. Then, he said, since she can't be accommodated here, let her go to the Fu family. Apart from his cold demeanor, Fu Nanzhou actually treated me well. In terms of food, clothing, and daily necessities, I received the same treatment as Fu Ruruo. I told him I would repay him in the future. He looked at his book and chuckled. No need, just study well, and don't let me see your ugly GPA again. Perhaps it was my later foolish infatuation that made him dislike me. I didn't throw away your sunflower, Fu Nanzhou said calmly, seemingly noticing my gaze. All right, thank you, I said. Screech, the car suddenly braked hard, causing the tires to make a sharp noise against the ground. My head jerked forward unexpectedly, and I instinctively closed my eyes, but the anticipated pain never came. It was Fu Nanzhou. His well-defined hand had covered my head. My head was fine, but his hand had turned red from the impact. I carefully observed his expression, almost wanting to shrink into the ground. What's wrong with you? His amber pupils were tinged with anger, showing a sense of oppression that made me too scared to breathe normally. His Adam's apple moved slightly as he spoke with a cold smile. What's wrong with me? Shen Zhaoyue, didn't you always eagerly try to please me before? Why are you acting reserved now? I nervously bit my lip, speaking very softly. No, I was just wondering what birthday gift you would give me. This answer should satisfy him, right? Sure enough, he chuckled. You'll definitely like it. His anger really puzzled me. In the past, I always tried every way to please him. To make him happy, I would go pick out gifts for Fu Ruru even when I had a high fever, cook different delicious meals every day, and learn how to be seductive in bed without dignity. I cherished all the time we spent together, so I would always chatter endlessly, which annoyed him. Now, when I stay quiet, he's still not satisfied. As the car starts again, I can feel Fu Ruruo's hateful gaze burning into my back, and I'm terrified. If Fu Ruruo is unhappy, I'll surely be beaten to death when I return to the mental hospital, or perhaps be torn apart by dogs. I can't go back to that mental hospital. They'll drive me completely insane. Divorce, if I can just get divorced, I'll be free. The birthday party was meant to be grand. But I couldn't care less about anything else. My eyes were fixed on the food on the table. The sweet aroma kept wafting toward me. My stomach made embarrassing noises, and the pain in my stomach made me wince. Yet all I could think about was eating. Fu Nanzhou was held up discussing business, while Fu Ruruo was surrounded by other wealthy young ladies like a star among her admirers. No one cared that it was my birthday party. I swallowed hard, my hands trembling with excitement. I kept stuffing the desserts into my mouth one after another. Even when my mouth was too full to swallow, I continued stuffing, completely oblivious to the strange looks from people around me. The piano melody of Wedding in Dreams suddenly started playing in the center of the hall. My mind went completely blank, my heart constricted, and almost instinctively, I fell to my knees and started kowtowing repeatedly. My hands even began tearing at my clothes. Bad dog was bad dog was wrong, shouldn't have seduced men. Intense fear made my whole body tremble. I could barely distinguish between reality and illusion. In the mental hospital, Fu Ruru always liked to play this piano piece whenever she tortured me. She said she was waiting for the day when Fu Nanzhou would marry her, and when they got married, she would have someone play this piece. She said I ruined everything, and if it weren't for me, Fu Nanzhou would have been hers forever. When she said this, the thin heel of her high shoe was pressing hard against my ankle, the intense pain penetrating to my bones. Will you ever dare to seduce men again? You bitch. Fu Ruru's face became distorted with anger and jealousy. Under the dim light, she looked like a devil from hell. Several people violently stripped off my clothes, and I could only curl up into a ball as their whips came down mercilessly. I was in so much pain that I would tremble every night. And in the mental hospital, the Wedding in Dreams played endlessly day and night, completely drowning out my screams. No one came to save me. Suddenly, someone yanked me up forcefully. It was Fu Nanzhou. He frowned, his eyes filled with anger, gripping my hand so tightly that it hurt. Shen Zhaoyue, have you lost your mind? His cold words pierced me like ice. I was gasping for breath as his face slowly merged and overlapped with the faces from the mental hospital. I shook my head, then nodded. Beiju Dog was wrong. Beiju Dog apologizes. But in that instant, I suddenly came to my senses and realized I was no longer in the mental hospital. Fu Ruru stood in the crowd watching me. The moment our eyes met, She raised her eyebrows smugly, as if warning me to stay away from Fu Nanzhou, or she would make my life a living hell. The discussions from people around became increasingly clear. Is Shen Jaiwe really mentally ill? She was acting like a crazy person just now. Yes, she scared me to death. It's only because President Fu still has feelings for their past relationship. Otherwise, how could such a lunatic be worthy of being Mrs. Gu? It's truly embarrassing. When she has an episode, she strips off her clothes. Could she have been during her time in the mental hospital? I felt Fu Nanzhou's grip on my hand tighten. I carefully looked at him, and his hand suddenly let go as he said coldly, "Since when did my family's matters become your topic of discussion?" In an instant, the world fell silent. Everyone carefully smiled apologetically and offered their apologies. But I knew that those words had gotten to Fu Nanzhou. After all, I knew him too well. For more than a decade, I had loved him selflessly, analyzing every subtle expression on his face, just hoping he would like me even a little bit. With trembling hands, I gently tugged at his sleeve. "Let's get divorced." He didn't say a word, but silently lifted me up in his arms, abandoning all the guests as he walked step by step towards the room on the third floor. His face was terrifyingly dark, and I didn't dare to speak another word. I was thrown forcefully onto the bed, and before I could catch my breath in my dizziness, his body carrying the fresh scent of pine pressed down on me. Fu Nanzhou's breath fell on my neck as my hands were bound immobile by his tie. His voice was soft yet carried an intense pressure. "Has anyone else touched you?" Though our physical intimacy was close, I felt our hearts were very far apart. My lips trembled, but I couldn't say a word. What could I say? Tell him that although I wasn't violated, my clothes had been torn off countless times? Or should I confront him? Wasn't he the one who sent me there with his own hands? I closed my eyes in agony as tears rolled down my face. His movement paused briefly, followed by a passionate kiss, so intense it took my breath away. As our lips and tongues collided, his eyes refused to miss any of my expressions. The strong possessiveness in his amber eyes almost frightened me. His hands restrained me, forcing me to endure. The fear in my heart and the pain on my body made me instinctively resist. Noticing my resistance, his grip became even tighter. "Are you in love with someone else?" He questioned my loyalty. Just as he was about to tear my clothes apart, bang, 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 someone knocked on the door. Fu Nanzhou frowned impatiently. "Get lost." There was a moment of silence outside the door, followed by Fu Ruru's crying voice. "Brother, I'm hurt." Fu Nanzhou glanced at me. "Wait for me." The moment the restraint on my body disappeared, I crawled to the corner of the bed using both hands and feet, wrapping myself tightly in the blanket. Only this way could I feel a bit of security. The door opened, and Fu Ruru cried like a child, showing her injured hand. "Brother, it hurts so much." Fu Nanzhou gently applied medicine for her, showing a tenderness I had never experienced. While Fu Nanzhou was washing his hands, Fu Ruru smugly smiled and waved her injured hand at me. "Oh my, I just got a tiny scratch, and brother is so concerned about me." But even if you died, brother wouldn't care at all. Indeed, she only had a slight scrape, with just a few tiny spots of blood seeping out. I unconsciously touched my own hand. Under the lace gloves, my hands were in a horrific state. On my first day in the mental hospital, Fu Ruru repeatedly stepped on my hand with my wedding ring. Then came the needles, long, thin needles that she slowly inserted along my fingernails. Fu Ruru enjoyed watching my expression of pain. When she was done playing, she wouldn't even remove the needles, leaving them stuck in my fingers until they became infected and festered. Fu Nanzhou had actually called me once, and I cried, begging him to let me out. I said I would be obedient, and from now on I would do everything he says. I told him I was being tortured to death and begged him to save me. But he just impatiently said, "Stop acting, you're annoying me." At this moment, Fu Ruru smugly waved her phone and looked at me provocatively. "You worthless dog, what if I post these videos online? Would your deceased parents be so angry they'd come back to life?" On her phone screen was playing the video of me being tortured, where I was begging like a dog, barely clothed. If my parents were still alive, how could she possibly torture me like this? Her mocking expression kept flashing before my eyes. Rage burned my reason to ashes completely. With strength that came from nowhere, I lunged forward, and the phone was instantly thrown away. I pressed down on Fu Ruru's body, with old and new hatred transforming me completely into a beast. She should never, ever have mentioned my parents. I'm just a worthless life anyway. Might as well die together? My hands were shaking as I gripped her throat, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from excitement. I watched as her face contorted from suffocation, her tears flowing uncontrollably, and for the first time, fear appeared in her eyes. Shun Jiayue, what are you doing? Fu Nanzhou's angry voice rang out. I was violently pushed to the ground, my hands scraping against the floor. The intense pain told me that the wounds on my hands had reopened. I lifted my head, trying my best to control my voice. She tortured me in the mental hospital. There's video evidence on the phone. As I spoke, my voice became choked with sobs. With evidence, surely Fu Nanzhou would believe me now? Fu Nanzhou looked at Fu Ruru with a complicated expression, then picked up the phone. Fu Ruru cried pitifully and tried to stop him. Brother, don't you believe me? I just asked her not to divorce you, but she wanted me dead, saying that if I died you would definitely get divorced. Brother, stop deceiving yourself. She doesn't love you at all, she cried hysterically. The veins on Fu Nanzhou's hand bulged as he gripped the phone. Shut up. He pressed the power button, and I nervously watched his every move. I was afraid the phone was broken, and I was afraid he would still protect Fu Ruru after seeing the video. Then, the screen lit up. Fu Nanzhou's eyes turned cold. What's playing here is clearly our wedding video. Shun Jiayue, you've really disappointed me. He looked at me, his eyes full of pain and conflict. I shook my head in disbelief. How could it be the wedding video? I practically crawled over to snatch the phone from his hand, frantically searching through every app that might have contained the video, but there was nothing. Shun Jiayue, you promised you would love me for a lifetime. Fu Nanzhou looked down at me condescendingly, his tone dripping with patronizing superiority. That's the only reason I married you. And now you want a divorce? Keep dreaming. Now apologize to Roro. I looked up at him, and his eyes were cold, as if only Fu Ruru deserved his gentleness. Meanwhile, Fu Ruru was playing the victim perfectly, sobbing continuously, and even trembled in fear when our eyes met. But I clearly saw the smugness and jealousy in her eyes. She was smug that I had fallen into her trap again, and jealous that she could marry Fu Nanzhou like I did. The sunlight outside the window poured in like gold. Unlike the dark and frightening psychiatric hospital, everything here was bright. I seemed to have found the courage and strength to resist. Shaking my head, I straightened my back and said, No, I won't apologize. Then go kneel outside and reflect. Until you admit your mistake. Fu Nanzhou lifted my chin, his tone as cold as frost. I stumbled outside and knelt in the courtyard without hesitation. As time ticked away second by second, I only felt pain. The wounds on my body had probably reopened, with sweat mixing with blood slowly seeping out. My knees had gone numb from the pain. I knelt there for a very, very long time, until dark clouds filled the sky and heavy rain poured down. The rain pelted against my body, and my white wedding dress was now completely soiled. My vision went black, and I completely passed out. In my last glimpse, I vaguely saw Fu Nanzhou. Not the 27-year-old Fu Nanzhou, but the 17-year-old Fu Nanzhou. At 17, he was so good to me. When Fu Ruru rejected me, he would protect me, saying we were family. Back then, he truly meant it when he considered me family. But later, I told him I liked him. Then he changed. He said I was delusional, accused me of having ulterior motives. But in reality, I just liked him so much that I forgot about our status. In the end, I got what I wished for, and married him. His reason for marrying me was simple. I had sworn to love him forever, never changing. He had no interest in making the effort to understand others, nor did he need marriage for support, so he was willing to maintain this family. But Fu Ruru was unwilling. In the past, when Fu Nanzhou said I was his adopted sister, I tried my best to please him, and Fu Ruru could barely tolerate me. But now, I've completely taken her brother away from her, so naturally she wishes me dead. It hurts so much, it feels like my body is being burned by fire. In my dazed state, I felt myself crying, my heart aching, as if someone kept calling my name. Who is it who's calling me so desperately? I finally had the strength to open my eyes. It was Fu Nanzhou. His hand was gripping mine tightly, as if holding onto his only lifeline. He looked much more haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and stubble on his chin revealing his exhaustion. Zhao Zhao, are you awake? He stared at me without blinking, his voice even trembling. I turned my head away, not wanting to look at him. He sensed my resistance and gripped my hand tighter. Zhao Zhao, you scared me to death, I thought you. Zhao Zhao, such an unfamiliar form of address now. I sighed. Fu Nanzhou, let's stop torturing each other. Let's get divorced. He remained silent. I lowered my eyes and continued. Just pretend I've fallen for someone else. I don't want anything. Just give me my freedom. Bang. Fu Nanzhou's fist slammed heavily against the wall. You've fallen for someone else. I nodded, meeting his angry gaze. I hate this life now, and most importantly, I hate you. When you touch me, it makes me sick. Fu Nanzhou was clearly trying hard to control his anger. Sick? He instantly imprisoned me in his arms, his hands starting to tear at my clothes. You actually find me disgusting? Then why did you try so hard to please me back then? To marry me? I closed my eyes, unable to stop my tears from falling. His lips kissed away my tears, but his hands didn't stop moving. This time, I didn't resist. But his movements suddenly stopped. What is this? Zhao Zhao, why are there so many wounds on your body? His voice trembled as his hands carefully traced the wounds, as if afraid of hurting me. I opened my eyes and smiled sarcastically. Isn't this what you wanted? He shook his head, his eyes filled with anger and heartache. Zhao Zhao, tell me who hurt you. I'll make them wish they were dead. I tilted my head. No matter who it is? He touched my wounds and nodded. No matter who it is. I pushed him away, undid my clothes, and looked at him calmly. This happened when I first entered the mental hospital. She said I wore provocative clothes every day to seduce men, so she burned my thighs with red-hot chopsticks. She said this way, men would find my legs disgusting. These bruises from being beaten with a stick when I refused to crawl like a dog still haven't faded. This is the wound she made by deliberately stomping on me with her high heels when she heard me calling your name in my sleep. And here is. I couldn't continue because I had too many wounds, so many that I had lost count. Why didn't you tell me? Fu Nanzhou grabbed his hair in agony and frustration, seemingly on the verge of breaking down. I asked myself why I hadn't told him, and then I remembered. When they locked me in a dog cage and made me eat dog food, they made me call you. I did tell you then. I told you I was in pain. I frantically hit my head, but you were busy preparing for Fu Ruru's birthday. You didn't have time to listen to me. You told me to stop pretending. Later, when they were stripping off my clothes, you were out shopping with Fu Ruru. So many times I told you, but you didn't believe me. You said I was just seeking attention, said you had to accompany Fu Ruru. His breathing beca. Me increasingly intense, as if his entire being was set ablaze. Who dare to hurt you? I'll kill them. Fu Nanzhou gritted his teeth, veins bulging on his arms, his eyes turning red with rage. My eyes were too sore, and when I blinked, tears unexpectedly fell. It was Fu Ruru. The air seemed to freeze in an instant, followed by a bone-chilling coldness.
Fu Horo.
He mechanically repeated my words, as if unable to believe the truth. I laughed mockingly and nodded. Yes, the dear sister you cherished so much. Do you still want to make her life a living hell? He laughed too, with a hint of madness crossing his face. Yes, I'll make anyone who hurt you suffer a fate worse than death. I closed my eyes wearily. Leave, I'm tired. Fu Nanzhou left, and everything returned to silence. I was rushed to the hospital immediately, where Fu Nanzhou arranged the best doctors and treatments for me. Everything was of the highest quality, yet my body still continued to waste away. Fu Nanzhou flew into a rage, but the doctor said my illness was psychological, something medicine couldn't cure. Countless nights, Fu Nanzhou held me in his arms, trying everything he could to comfort me, but I just couldn't find happiness. He asked, "What would make you happy?" I looked at him and said, "I want to see Fu Ruru. I want to know if you really punished her." Deep down, I never believed Fu Nanzhou would have the heart to punish Fu Ruru. They were blood siblings with an unbreakable bond, a relationship that no one could change or replace. That's why Fu Ruru acted so recklessly, knowing Fu Nanzhou would always protect her. Fu Nanzhou's hand paused as he was feeding me soup, his eyes darkening slightly. "All right," he said. I thought I would see Fu Ruru exactly as before, perhaps just sent abroad by Fu Nanzhou, or maybe just unhappy about being criticized, but still the high and mighty young lady of the Fu family. But I was wrong. Fu Nanzhou had truly made Fu Ruru's life worse than death. Fu Nanzhou led me to a remote suburb, into a dark basement where the mixture of dampness and the smell of blood invaded my nostrils, nearly making me vomit. Under the dim yellow light, I couldn't believe my eyes. Could this woman forcibly strung up really be the proud Fu Ruru? Her body was covered in countless wounds, flesh torn open, blood still slowly dripping onto the floor. She let out agonized moans and struggled to open her eyes, her voice weak. "Brother, save me." Fu Nanzhou ignored her, only looking at me pleadingly. "Zhao Zhao, I'll make her feel the same pain as you did, so, are you feeling a bit happier now?" Before I could speak, Fu Ruruo started screaming hysterically. Brother, how could you torture me for this whore? What would mom and dad think? Shin Zhaoyue, you bitch. When I get out of here, I'll make sure you die. Slap. A heavy blow landed on Fu Ruruo's face and the world fell silent. Fu Nanzhou looked at her coldly. I don't have such a venomous sister. Fu Ruruo was crying, seemingly crying herself to death, but this time Fu Nanzhou showed no tolerance for her. I grew tired of watching. Fu Nanzhou carefully guided me out. Be careful, it's dirty here. Behind me, Fu Ruruo's voice was hoarse and frenzied. Brother, you said her suffering would be repaid 1,000 times over, but what about you? You were the one who sent her to the mental hospital, haha. My footsteps faltered as I clearly felt Fu Nanzhou's body stiffen beside me. Back in the room, Fu Nanzhou carefully took out the steaming, nutritious meal from the lunchbox. Eat quickly. You need strength to stay alive. I tilted my head and looked at him. But Fu Nanzhou, I don't want to live anymore. He lowered his head, staying silent for a long while before looking up at me. I was wrong, Zhao Hao. I didn't say anything. He gently held my hand. His hand was so cold. As long as you're willing to live, I'll do anything. Anything? I asked. Yes, anything. Even if you want me to die. Fu Nanzhou nodded firmly. All right, I want a divorce. I said. No. Zhao, this is not acceptable. Fu Nanzhou anxiously held me in his arms, as if terrified I would vanish. I pushed him away and said mockingly, Didn't you just say you'd be willing to die? But divorce is not acceptable? You liar. Fu Nanzhou straightened up, took the fruit knife from the table and handed it to me. You can kill me, but we cannot divorce. You promised to love me for a lifetime. Holding the knife, I laughed with self-mockery. Fu Nanzhou, you're just confident that I won't actually do it. How hypocritical. Then, Fu Nanzhou's hand covered mine, pointing the knife tip toward himself. Before I could react, the blade had already pierced him. I was so frightened that I instinctively dropped the knife. Are you insane? Yes, I am insane. But Zhao, you can kill me if you want, yet you can only be my wife for life, can only love me alone. His tone was calm, but the madness and possessiveness in his eyes made my heart pound. His blood had stained his clothes, yet he still wiped my bloodied hands clean without changing his expression. Until the entering nurse let out a cry of surprise, he finally left reluctantly. I curled up alone under the blanket, clearly realizing Fu Nanzhou's madness. Since I couldn't escape, I could only accept it. At worst, it couldn't be more painful than being in a mental hospital. Lying on the hospital bed, watching Fu Nanzhou rambling on, I felt alive for the first time. I started cooperating with the doctor's treatment, and everything seemed to be developing in a good direction, until the video of me being tortured appeared online. My hands holding the phone trembled uncontrollably, and I collapsed kneeling on the ground, then desperately pounded my H. Kitty, don't think about it anymore, don't think about it anymore. But it was useless. Those memories I tried desperately to forget rushed back into my mind. My body hurts so much. Fu Nanzhou rushed over to hug me, and I started desperately kowtowing again. I was wrong. He desperately tried to stop me from hurting myself, and after what seemed like an eternity, I finally came to my senses. I looked up at him as he held me tightly, his tears falling onto my face. They were warm, so he could cry after all. I thought he never cried. Even at his father's funeral, I hadn't seen him shed a single tear. He seemed so strong that tears were beneath him. But now he was crying. Looking at the mess around us, I choked out, Please, let me go. All right, he said, wiping away my tears. Fu Nanzhou acted quickly. The videos online quickly disappeared, and the public's attention was soon diverted by other breaking news. But I couldn't get over it. When I went out, people's gazes would subtly fall on me, and I could still faintly hear their whispers. Isn't she that girl from the internet? TSK, if I was tortured like that, I would have just died. So shameful. Yeah, why is she so obsessed with staying alive? But when I looked up, they hurried past with sealed lips, as if everything had been my imagination. I just wanted to escape, to run away to a place where no one knew me. The flight ticket was already booked, and the doctor said I could be discharged. The weather was beautiful on the day of my discharge, with nurses bustling around helping me pack. Then a knife pressed against my waist. Shin Zhaoyue, long time no see. It was Fu Ruruo. She had changed so much that I hadn't recognized her. She was now extremely thin, with even the smallest size nurse uniform hanging loose on her frame. She wore a mask on her face, revealing only a pair of eyes filled with pain and madness. The video, it was you, wasn't it? I asked. Yes, but I never expected you to be so shameless. Everyone knows you're a slut now. Why haven't you killed yourself yet? She moved the knife to my throat, its sharp blade cutting into my skin, causing a stinging pain. I want to see my brother. Fu Ruruo howled, making everyone around her instinctively back away in fear. Time ticked by slowly. Fu Nanzhou came running, the light sweat on his forehead and slightly panting breath showing his anxiety. Fu Ruruo, put down the knife. Put down the knife, and I'll let you go. Fu Nanzhou carefully persuaded, his eyes full of panic. Let me go? Brother, I won't believe you anymore. Fu Ruruo spoke chokingly. You just let them torture me, all just to get revenge for that cheap woman. We are blood siblings, brother. Fu Nanzhou looked at her, his voice very low. Yes, we are siblings, so why did you hurt the person I love? Fu Ruruo seemed to completely break down. The person you love? Her? Is she even worthy? Fu Ruruo staggered step by step towards Fu Nanzhou, her hand trembling as she gripped the knife. Then what am I to you? Brother, you said we would be family forever. She won't love you forever, but I will. Let's leave everything behind and go abroad. Let's get married. I'm the one who can love you forever, brother. She seemed to have gone mad, her whole body excitedly gesturing wildly. Fu Nanzhou looked at her in disbelief. We are siblings. How can you have such disgusting thoughts? This is incest. Brother, you're rejecting me? Then, let's go to hell together. Fu Ruruo raised her knife high, bringing it down with intense hatred. I instinctively closed my eyes, but the expected pain never came. Instead, I fell into a warm embrace. It was Fu Nanzhou. My eyes widened in shock. Police. Hands on your head. The police burst in, and Fu Ruruo was completely subdued. In an instant, my world seemed to shatter completely. The voices of police, doctors, and Fu Nanzhou's blood filled my entire world. Fu Nanzhou held me in his arms, and at the very last moment he said, I love you. He said, you must forget me. He was carried away by doctors and nurses for emergency treatment,